Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome back after 2 weeks away. It's good to see everyone back. So welcome to another session. And before we begin our session today, I'm going to invite Irene. Is Irene? Yes, Irene is here. I'd like to invite Irene to share the opening prayer or invocation with us before we go to our next section of today's session. So Irene, please go ahead.
Thank you, Winnie. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, sisters. Today I'm going to do an invocation in my local language. Then after that, I'll explain what it means. We will all pray now. Ashankai, Papa Leseriani, torripo yiok kipuoito aiteru ena darasa, ore kipuo yiok aisuma, Kai ai torripo yiok, torripo pooking'ae, torripo Fimi, tamayiana pooking'ae, tamayiana organizations pookin naisaidia yiok maitu ene taata, tamayiana. Ashukoki enashe naisho enkisisa. Naa tenkarna e Yesu aatomono naa ISIS. Amen. So this prayer is a short prayer. We are asking God to bless us as we are going to start our class, to bless us all and guide us in everything we do. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Irene, for opening first with that prayer. And so today we're going to have three sessions during this session, 3-in-1 sessions. And what we're going to start with is that we're going to start with some of you giving us your experiences during the permanent forum sessions last week. For those of you who, if you were able to attend in person or if you followed the conversation online, so we would like to hear some of your experiences. So we're going to do that first. We're going to talk about your experiences in the permanent forum first, and then after that, we're going to welcome a guest who's going to come and speak to us, and then afterwards we will have the advocacy. We'll have some of you share your advocacy plans with us today. So yeah, so we're going to start with the permanent forum experiences, and I'd like to have everyone from every region because let me see how many we are. So what I'll do is that I'll call out your name so that it's easier. I'll call out your name and then you can share with us what your experience was in the past 2 weeks with the permanent forum. And then when our guest comes in, we'll stop and then listen to what our guest has to say. So let's start with Richa. Richa, please unmute yourself and let us know what your experience was with the forum last week. Richa?
Yes, hello.
Hello.
Hello, yes. Thank you, Vinny, for this platform. I will quickly share some of the side events or statements that were delivered from Asia Indigenous Peoples Pact. So there had been much focus on human rights defenders from Asia Indigenous Peoples Pact, and there was delivery of statement on human rights dialogue on agenda item number 5 and item number 3. These were some of the part that I had also, supported them, and also I had been part of a site event organized by FIMI on CEDAW General Recommendation number 39, which was very relevant and important to Indigenous women and girls.
Richa, are you there?
Hello.
Yeah.
So sorry, my network is a bit down due to the rain. I'll try to type my
Okay, yeah, that's fine. You could just type out your experience if that's better for you because of your network. All right, so we can move to another person now. Johnary.
Hola, buenos días, hermanas.
Good morning, sisters. It's a pleasure to be here once again in this space. The experience that I had at the permanent forum is that I could only participate in one, and that was the CEDAW agenda on Article 39. In that space, there was talk about the integration or the bringing together of all the different kinds of discrimination against women and Indigenous women, and how we might be able to include also talk about children who also suffer from discrimination for different reasons. It could be their ethnicity, among other things. I was not able to participate in the others, unfortunately, because I had some events that day, so I wasn't able to participate. Thank you.
Thank you, Johnary. Maria.
Thank you very much, Winnie. Good morning, sisters. Good afternoon. Good evening. I'm glad to meet you again. My experience during the permanent forum was nice. I didn't manage to follow all the sessions, but I managed to follow some. One of it was the session which was for the chairperson of the United Permanent Forum on Indigenous issues, and also there was one. It was opening remarks, which was chaired by which the chairperson and the Indigenous leader of Laikipia were welcomed, and they talked about the importance of the Indigenous territories, water, forests, and oceans, and also they mentioned on biodiversity and emphasized on protection of biodiversity, and also I managed to follow another one on where the Indigenous member states were able to give statements on different issues, for example, on the territorial health and human health. Yeah, it was a nice experience. And also concerning the time, it was 3 minutes, and when the time elapsed, they switch off the microphone. So it was a nice experience, and also I got to learn some of the issues. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Marianne, and thank you for pointing that out. I'm glad that you're able to experience what we've been talking about in some of our sessions about making sure that your statement is concise, because they will switch off the mic, whether you're, if you're a UN body or you're an Indigenous person, people's representative, how your mic will be switched off. So it's good that you also brought that up, so that knowing that you are paying attention during class and being able to pick that out during the session. So thank you for that. Let's go to Shipon.
Hello. Yeah, so I mostly kept up with the permanent forum through like the articles and debriefs that the UN posted after, because the time zone difference was so huge, so I wasn't able to follow it live. But I did think it was interesting that the Interior Secretary Deb Haaland gave the keynote, and she's been, so for the US, she kind of talked a lot about how she wants to improve the rights of Indigenous peoples within the US, which I just think is interesting, because moving forward with this advocacy plan and for us in the territories, and just in people in general in the Pacific territories of the US, we've been trying to look for an advocate for us in a lot of the work we're doing, and a lot of our and she's kind of just like a very important person as like the Secretary of the Interior. She has a lot of power and influence over a lot of the different human rights struggles that we're facing in the territories. So I thought her speech was really interesting, and I'm hoping that it was more than just a speech, because I know the US will send their delegates to the UN, but to me, I always feel like it's very interesting how the US will show up to these things, but see how they actually are, whether or not they'll follow through on those promises. And then the other thing to note is this was kind of leading up to, I mean, obviously this is different than the permanent forum, but it still has to do with the UN. But I know Vanuatu was in the news recently for a really big win for our region in the Pacific, that actually a lawyer from Guam and his firm represented Vanuatu, because they're going to get an advisory opinion for climate justice. And so it was interesting to see the conversations around climate change for Indigenous people in the region, and how a lot of people, and how specifically people in the Pacific are kind of leading that conversation. But yeah, I thought it was really good. It was really interesting. I am hoping that when the US is part of these conversations, that they will stay true to those promises. But those were most of my reflections after the week. Thank you.
Thank you, Shibon. Can we go to Metalith? Metalith? Metalith, can you hear us? Okay. Well.
Oh, sí, buenos días. Sí, los
Yes, I can hear you. Good morning.
Good morning. Please go ahead and share with us what your experience was with the forum, or what your reflections were from the permanent forum for the last 2 weeks.
de todo el foro han
Of the
habido
whole forum,
quizás 2 episodios que sí
there were
me
2 episodes that I really liked the most,
se ha abarcado temas muy
because they talked about topics that were very important,
por así decirlo,
and they have to do with
de cada
the
país,
problems of each country and each region. One of the interesting points was when President Petro from Colombia spoke, and he really focused on the respect that must be given to everything that is nature and the care of our earth and territories. And he gave a lot of value to the farmers and to indigenous people, rural inhabitants, whether they be, white, black, Asian, no matter what the race or sex. And so that made an impact on me because one way or the other, I think that we still have the hope of educating people with similar or even better ideals. And also one of the contributions of one of my friends there who was there in person, and she spoke very clearly about the problems that we're facing in Peru. So those were two of the main things that were really great. And especially I loved the second part where the voice of the indigenous people from our area were heard, in this case, the Aymara voice. And so I'm not thinking of the right word right now, but what I'm taking with me a good deal of inspiration and hope that we can educate political actors who will fight for the rights of citizens and for indigenous peoples in the defense of our territories. So those were the two main things that made an impact on me. And in general, I liked it. I thought they were talking about really important issues. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madali, for sharing. Can we go to Regina? Regina? Regina, I don't know if you can hear us. Okay, let's wait for Regina. Can we go to Irene?
Hello all. For me, what I learned from the permanent forum, I really learned a lot. One, I followed the opening remarks where Olekaunka from Laikipia was talking about the displacement of indigenous people, and I learned that the government maybe should have a dialogue with indigenous people instead of just displacing them. I wasn't able to watch all live, but I followed some of later, and I really learned a lot. The aspect of time, you're only given 3 minutes. When it's over, the mic is switched off, even if you're still talking. And it was interesting, and I wish that maybe in the next session I will maybe be able to attend in person. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Irene. Regina, are you there?
I'm sorry, my connection is not.
Okay, I can't hear you well. Can you speak a bit louder?
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah, that's better.
Okay, so actually I have nothing to share because I have a conflicted schedule with the things happening in the field with the indigenous peoples in the villages in emergency. I mean, I mentioned it before with the ecotrop and stuff, so I have to solve the problem in the field, and I have to stay in the field for like 2 weeks to solve that problem, and there is no connection in the field. So it's a really unfortunate sentence.
Okay, Regina. Thank you. iPhone X, I think this is Juliana. Juliana, is that you with the iPhone? Juliana?
Hola, buenos días, buenas noches a cada una.
Good morning and good evening to everyone. Yes, here I am. Sorry I didn't change my name and my identification. My experience was that it was an important experience for me. I had the opportunity once to be there in person to hear the inauguration and to hear the authorities. Not all of the authorities were there from the different countries. And we represent a lot more countries in this space that we have here. There are some things that gave us some hope, but there are some other cases that were really worrisome, because you see that you don't have the real commitment to be able to attend the needs of the different peoples who exist in our various countries. I also had the opportunity to be able to listen to some of the speeches, which filled me with a great deal of satisfaction to be able to hear that so many different groups are present, talking about the same things that we talked about in our declarations. And our declarations became part of that important advocacy space. I was only able to participate in a few events, side events, which are also part of the advocacy on different issues. For example, the CEDAW issue, the issue of funding, which you also talked about with us, where they talked about the importance of how this has changed over the years. At first, it was very difficult to be able to address the topic of funding, but the indigenous peoples were able to get little by little some direct access to funding. It continues to be complex because only a few spaces have been able to build proposals from the indigenous peoples, and with indigenous peoples, most funding is created, and the guidelines are prepared, and the various topics are prepared, but they don't consult with the indigenous peoples about what should be included there. And there's a need to talk about this topic and to make sure that the proposals come from the communities and from the indigenous peoples and based on their own needs. That's very important so that people can identify with these proposals and make real changes. And the final declarations from the different organizations and the women and the different networks of indigenous peoples are all part of that same process that we participated in. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Juliana, for sharing that. And Richard, thank you also for just adding on to what your experience was. Yes, the Indigenous World was also launched during the Permanent Forum, and you can go to the IFGEA website and rewatch the session if you want, or also download the book itself and read it. It has a lot of articles on, especially I think this year there's been a lot of highlight on Indigenous women and girls. So they also have articles on Indigenous women and girls on the on the issue for this year. So you can go to the GEA website and see what the Indigenous World book has this year. Elizabeth, can we hear from you? What your experience was?
Claro que sí. Hola, muy buenos días, muy buenas tardes, muy buenas noches a todas.
Yes, of course. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone, sisters. First of all, it's a pleasure to see you again after the break that we've had over a few days to connect again and to be at the various sessions, although it was virtual. So we were able to see how impactful the event is, and to see so many women and so many men and organizations together there. I will be following the presentations about women, about sisters who were also in person, such as the focus group from Latin America and the Caribbean, and a lot of sisters that we know, actually. Something that I also want to highlight from the events was that all of the recommendations that were made have to be very precise. They did not have the ability to continue speaking for many minutes. They had specific time, and they highlighted, it was like 7 minutes, and they had, especially the recommendations from youth were very important, Indigenous youth. And something that was important is that they were trying to incorporate the perspective of the fact that it needed to be intergenerational, multi-generational, if you'd like. It is very important also, as I mentioned, the various sectors that were private companies, meaning that not only civil societies and other organizations participated. So this was a very important issue that is being discussed right now, and it has to do with the civil society mechanisms. They also spoke about sustainable commitments that have to do with health, with social work, with the water, the environment, and the health crisis that we're living all over the world, especially how these circumstances affect women, boys and girls, Indigenous peoples, HIV populations, and people with disabilities. It is such a broad theme. So this invited us to be part of it. And as students of the Global Leadership School, if we had been able to be there in person, I'm sure that we would have been able to participate in additional issues and to do more things, because there's some issues that were discussed in class, like how to ask to speak on the floor, how to be concise. So I believe that all of the issues, that all of the subjects that have been discussed here in this space have helped us understood the mechanisms of the forum, or the mechanics of the forum, if you'd like. So we can see that the issues that were touched on were very important. Perhaps more could have been done, but I think that the participations were very important. And we were able to see how important this space is to advocate and to bring the voice, our voices to those spaces. So it's a privilege for those who are there. And it's a great responsibility to be present. So that is how I felt.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Brittany?
Hermanas, buenos días, ¿me escuchan? ¿Se me escucha?
Hello, sisters, can you hear me?
Ay, pensé que no se me
Sí, la escuchamos, adelante.
Ya. A ver, hermanas, buenos días.
Good morning, sisters.
Rescatar de todo lo del foro.
My point of view from everything that was presented is, above all, that it's so impressive to see so many women, also men, so many of us from all over the world who have many ideas, many common ideas and common problems. And we can see that at the forum. There are many people who think like me. Oh, I'm sorry, there's an echo. But what I would like to tell you about my impressions is especially the participation of a sister from Peru that I was able to listen to. And it was so gratifying to hear her, because if I had had the opportunity to be there in person, I would have liked to talk about what's happening in Peru with the authorities from my country. She was so concise. She's an older woman. She has a lot of experience. And I was able to see that they're working for us, that there are older people who are working and have been working for us all of this time, and they're coming to these international events to advocate for us. So that was really gratifying. And what I would have liked to do, what I would have liked to say was said. And down there, they spoke about the current situation in our country, how human rights are being violated, and highlighting that the Peruvian state has committed and to the agreement has ratified every one of the international agreements. So that was the most impactful to me of everything I heard, and all of the issues. So all the issues about climate change, discrimination, poverty, all of the issues that we continue suffering. But at least they're being made known and people are working on them. So that really encourages me to continue down this path, working on these issues, and to realize that there's a lot that we still need to do for us, for the future generations, to preserve our cultures and to mitigate discrimination against our people. I walk away with so many ideas, and I know that all of us are also encouraged by everything we've heard, walking away with many new ideas as well. But those are my impressions from the forum.
Thank you, Brittany, for sharing that. I saw Herma, but I think she fell off. I can see Pema has joined us. Pema, we are talking about our sessions our experiences during the permanent forum. And so if you could also share what your experience was during the permanent forum, if you were able to join, and how that, what your experience was with whatever sessions that you were able to join in. So Pema? Pema, can you hear us? Okay. Okay, so is there anyone, okay, so Pema will share through the chat. Thank you, Pema, for letting us know. Was there anyone who had the organization join? Oh, Herma is back. Herma, can you please share with us your experience before we move forward?
Hello, sisters. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon. I was not able to follow the permanent forum. I was in another field work. That's why I was not able to follow. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Herma. Yeah, so another question I had is, was there anyone, maybe by a show of hands, you can just raise your hands on the reaction button, if any of your organizations was able to join the forum in person? Representatives from your organization, if any of them were able to join in person. No one? Okay, Metalith, anyone else whose representatives of the organizations were able to join the forum in person? All right. Well, I'm also happy to say that we had our statement read during the forum by Tanya. Tanya was here speaking with us a few weeks ago. She's from Peru. She was able to read our global statement. And I think that was exciting. I don't know if any of you was able to catch that during some of the live sessions that were being broadcasted through the UN TV. But maybe then I won't call out anyone, but I'll just possibly like for any one of you to volunteer to share is, we've been talking with so many experts during the last few months actually, and we've had also very many sessions where we've had people talk to you about the permanent forum. And so my question is, in some of the sessions that you were able to attend, whether it's the live plenary sessions or joining in the side events, were you able to connect some of the things that were talked about during the sessions here and what you saw during the permanent forum? Do you think that it was helpful to have the knowledge that, or to have the information that was shared by the experts on the permanent forum, and how it prepared you to be able to participate, or to be able to, well, you know, if you're watching through the permanent, through the UN TV, you were not able to participate as was in the previous years, but how did it prepare you for the permanent forum? If anyone wants to, please share with us that. Anyone?
I can share.
Yes, please go ahead, Shipon. Thank you.
Okay. I think for me, there was the biggest thing going through the class and then seeing in practice how the forum works. I think I used to have maybe not a full understanding of what these permanent forums do for different groups who are trying to get their issues to have a platform, and how specifically for me, like obviously I understand now, I have a better understanding of the different mechanisms of policy change that goes on, and how the UN can be a very complex system. But I think the biggest thing was mostly just visibility of communities and issues, that a lot of like them being there is not so much because we know that in the next year all of those changes and all of these big dreams that we have for our communities are going to happen overnight, but it's kind of like these moments of mass visibility that draw a lot of support, not just like from your own region, but from other regions. And so for me, the whole week during the UN forum, it was like, and similar to how this class is learning about other people's issues and building solidarity that way, but it's interesting to see how international solidarity with other like movements builds as a result of gathering in these spaces, and how the work is almost not necessarily, it doesn't necessarily culminate at these forums. It's almost like the connections that you build with these movements after, and even the conversations that are happening throughout the week outside of like the sessions or even after. Because even just like in the news, or just like learning that other people and how other people are approaching, for example, water rights, because that's a big thing in the Pacific right now, or at least in my home. Yeah, I guess what I'm saying is that the forum, I was trying to wrap my head around what something like this does tangibly for the communities once you go back home and after these 2 weeks are done. And yeah, it was just really interesting to think about what we've been learning in the class, and what different professors had to say about change in your community being a long process of being persistent, but also building strength in your movement by attaching it to other people's, and kind of like using these big forums and these big events as strategic places to spread the message of what's going on in your community. Because that was another thing that I saw like at the forum, was a lot of these smaller indigenous communities that I don't know very much about having an opportunity to like raise their voice, and strategically using this moment where the world is kind of watching to, yeah, bring that to use it, that moment strategically. But yeah, those are most of my thoughts.
Thank you, Shubon. Elizabeth, did you want to say something? I saw that you had unmuted.
Sí, gracias, Winnie.
Yes, thank you, Winnie. Yes, I believe that something very important that I really want to highlight right now is that the classes that we had with the experts, with our people with a lot more experience, we saw how now at the permanent forum, they how they worked. And I was wondering how it would feel to be at a space that is so impactful. They told us, for example, how they're organized, how they express and communicate. We can see people there from our own institutions, from the states, the commissions, the civil societies, how we can see their work in that platform, how the the voices from the peoples are included there. The example that our brother Dario was giving us when he was telling us, for example, that years ago, we did not have the quality as peoples with participations, and we're not to participate before at meetings of that nature. We're not allowed to participate in these spaces necessarily before, and I could see that now this is almost we view as normal, as a normal situation. So it's important to remember this and to participate in all the spaces that we can. But not forgetting everything that was taught to us at the school, and especially the of this process. Now we can see the result of all that work. So we should always connect and thread all the theory that has been presented to us with the work in practice that we see, like at the permanent forum. So we need to continue understand that we have to continue understanding the dynamics, to continue learning about how it all works at those spaces. And I believe that the school has been crucial for me, for my education. And we know several sisters that are now there who are doing an incredibly important work, an important role there. But I think that the classes have been very important. All the theory, all the practice, everything we've learned has been really important, and I am committed to continue learning. So I thank everyone. That would be my contribution.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. And I think that's a point of us having the sessions, is so that we can give you some skills, or you can have some skills or some knowledge on how to navigate not just the permanent forum, but all these other processes that you may have the opportunity to attend in future. So whether it's a permanent forum, whether it's expert mechanism on the rights of Indigenous people, so that's the climate conversations, or the biodiversity, whichever of the mechanisms you have an opportunity to attend, then we hope that some of the things that you're learning here is what you'll carry with you when you go there. And the truth is, the first time you go for one of these sessions, it might not, it will still be confusing. For most of us, it's like that. It's confusing for the first time, and then you learn as you continue to participate. But the information that you get during these sessions are very important, because then they give you a better understanding of how to participate better when you arrive there, as opposed to someone who has never been to any of these sessions, or has not heard about the forum before, has not been told how the participation of the forum is. So I think the information that you get through the sessions gives you an advantage over very many people who do not have prior information on how on what the forum is, or how to participate effectively during the forum. And then again, what Siobhan said was, making those connections and building alliances with other movements, and also just learning about other people's struggles and what their triumphs have been over the years, and how you can learn from that, because there's a lot of good practices that you can get from the forum. And so it's a very important space for learning and unlearning some things, and for building partnerships, for building alliances with other people, other Indigenous peoples who have been there before, or other sisters who've been there before. And so we just hope that you'll take the information that you've been learning throughout these sessions about the forum and about other mechanisms, that information is what you'll carry with you when you get an opportunity to actually participate in person in some of these mechanisms. I'd like to ask maybe Orte or Cecilia, if you want to give us any reflections you've had from this permanent forum, and you can also connect it to previous permanent forums that you have attended in person, and this one that has been online. So Orte.
Gracias, Winnie. Buenos días, buenas
Thank you,
tardes.
Winnie. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. The truth is that I am so pleased to see everyone again and to gather again at this space where we can share our experience over the last few years. My first experience in person indeed was a space where at the beginning, personally, I remember that I was saying, would it be possible to have an answer to our realities at this level? Can they really see our realities at this level at the UN? But now I realize that all of the mechanisms depend on us a lot when it comes to how to use all of this, how to bring it to practice, to bring it to our communities. So it is extremely important prepared to be able to advocate in those spaces, because it is that is an advocacy place, it's an advocacy space. So the leadership school, the Indigenous Women's Leadership School has organized their themes, their sessions, and has brought experts, keeping all of this in mind, because they're all people who have very important roles at the permanent forum. So it's so important to see the faces of the people who, one way or another, advocate for our peoples, for the realities on the ground of our peoples. Over the last few years, virtually, we have seen that every year was different. And this year, unfortunately, there was no direct access for participation at the sessions, but there were activities that were on the sidelines, that took place on the sidelines of the permanent forum. And even when we had the information, I remember that a colleague was saying, I am trying to enter virtually, obviously, this session, but I don't find anything. And I remember that I was saying, let's take a look at the schedules. There is so much information. It's simple, but sometimes it becomes complicated. So it's part of the experience that we have been accumulating. Sometimes there's simple details that gets us lost and we miss some opportunities because we don't have everything at hand. That's been more complicated, obviously. Over the years, we have been learning. And as we said at the beginning, we have seen how to bring the realities from our communities to that UN level. We may not be able to solve every issue, but we even derive other actions from there, from the contacts that we establish there. And I believe that the permanent forum, the UN permanent forum, you are going to bring the lessons to a different level. Whether in person or virtually, we all end up with a lot of questions. So now we're going to be attentive to the next year's theme, for example. So it is always a very important experience. There are a lot of issues that concern women. And as Meredith and Brittany said, just by being able to gather and to know that there are a lot of us thinking the same way, all advocating for our rights as women and as Indigenous peoples. So I believe that this is a great opportunity, and the contacts that we established and working that we are able to do is crucial. In Guatemala, for example, on May 16th, we have the first meeting with the Indigenous peoples repertoire. We will have the opportunity to address all of these issues with this person, and we will see what we can do with all of the recommendations.
So once it has been published, then who will give it follow-up? It's really important for us in each of our spaces in our communities to identify the responsibilities that we're going to take on in terms of relating to all of these different mechanisms, because often we don't take advantage of them. And our governments often aren't really that interested in following up on the commitments that they make through these mechanisms. So that's why we don't have true responses. If we listen to each of the Indigenous peoples from the different countries, you see that the countries have interest in theory, but it's Indigenous peoples who are truly interested in these topics. So that's why it's important to keep these topics on the table and to keep raising our voices and to share the realities of our countries. As Indigenous women, also, there's so much work to do. As long as we have the backing of our organizations, because we really can't act individually, we can't personalize our leadership. We are trying to represent our organizations when we act. That's extremely important, and that's all I really want to share right now, Winnie. Thank you so much for the space.
Thank you, Arthur. Yeah, maybe I'll also share what my experience. Well, just something that I observed. So this year, in the last 2 years, when people were participating virtually, you could actually actively participate. Like you could make a statement virtually, and that's or have input virtually. But this year it wasn't the same. And I honestly think that it made a lot of difference when people could actively participate virtually, not just by watching the event, but also being able to make statements virtually. I think that was a very good idea, and I was hoping that this year it would be the same. But unfortunately, it wasn't that way. So I think that for me, I wasn't able to hear all the recommendations, but I was hoping that would be one recommendation, that the hybrid sessions are continued. Then it will give more Indigenous peoples opportunities to be able to participate in the forum, to be able to actually make statements from wherever they are, because honestly, traveling to New York and staying there for 1 of the 2 weeks is super expensive for very many people, and they're not able to afford that. But they might be able to affording internet bundles to be able to participate online would be a cheaper alternative to get more Indigenous peoples to be able to participate in these spaces. Or even I think we had this before, for instance, during the FEMI World Conference last year, there was groups of women who came together. So you'd have one person logged into the conference, but you have maybe 20 or 30 women who are listening in on the conference and being able to being able to participate. So having the hybrid sessions, I think would increase Indigenous people's participation. And that is also something that has been, that people have been talking about a lot, in terms of, how do we increase Indigenous people's participation? Having the hybrid session, I think for me would be a way that we're able to increase that participation. And I think even more people are now, not just even organizations that are not necessarily at the forum, we're having events, webinars during that time. So they'll say a lot of information on Twitter, on Facebook, on LinkedIn. We're inviting people to come join sessions on, online sessions during the permanent forum. So you could also participate in those. So again, as you continue to do your advocacy, please keep an eye out on some of the organizations that work within your region, or organizations that work internationally. They have a lot of information that they give on their social media pages. You can follow that. FIMI is always giving out information on their social media if you're following them on Twitter. So again, check the organizations that work in your regions, that work in areas that you're interested in. Follow those organizations on their social media so that they're able to, see what events they have coming up, especially online events. There are a lot of webinars that are being held every other time, and you'll be able to join those. Some of these organizations also having conversations on Twitter. You can follow those conversations and also chip in, tell people what your experiences are, what's happening in your own region, and you never know who you'll meet, or in that comment section. Some people might be able to find a funder or someone who's working in the same space, and they might reach out to you in that way. So just being active in the different platforms to be able to make those connections, on web before you actually make them in person. I'm also hoping that some of the sessions, or what you had during the forum, in the sessions that you were able to attend, also inspired you in your advocacy plans. It could have inspired an activity, it could have inspired a different outlook on something that you're working on in your advocacy plan, which I hope everyone has been able to complete, or because we are going to be presenting them in this week. So I just want to ask maybe one or two of you to share with us if any of the events that happened during the permanent forum influenced your outlook, or influenced how you were able to finalize your advocacy plan. If anyone can share. Anyone who was inspired, or whose advocacy plan was influenced by your participation during the permanent forum? No one? Give me a moment. Is anyone who, or okay, let me ask the question in a different way. Was there anyone whose advocacy plan, the issue that you're addressing in your advocacy plan, did you hear it being talked about at the permanent forum? One or two of you. Okay. All right. I guess we will hear what your advocacy plans were, and then we'll be able to probably make a connection on some of the conversations that were had during the permanent forum. But thank you everyone for sharing what your experiences have been at the permanent forum. I hope that maybe next year or the next we'll be able to attend in person. Please remember also to check the times for the times for application with the voluntary fund, so that you're able to attend any of the processes that they sponsor in person. Be attentive to the deadlines, especially for next year. There's still time for you to be able to follow up on the website, as we had been that has been shared before. And so we have, or you have an opportunity to attend the forum next year in person. So thank you. I'm going to hand over to Cecilia, and she can guide us on the next steps. Please go ahead, Cecilia. Thank you.
Thank you, Winnie. Hola a todas, buenos días.
Hello to everyone. We're going to make some adjustments in today's agenda because the guest that we had planned for this last class was unable to attend. She just canceled a few minutes ago, so we ask for your understanding. And in order to take advantage of this time, I think we'll just go ahead with the advocacy plans. Your advisors have already told you of the order of the presentation. So let's take advantage of this time. And since we have a little bit more time because of the cancellation of our guest, we will be able to proceed with a little bit more time. So let's go ahead and start with this next part of our agenda with the presentation of your work. Interpreter apologizes. The bandwidth is low where Cecilia is speaking. We will talk about the parts of your plan that you feel are the best to share if you can't share everything. This is a really important time for everyone because it helps you to learn more about what each of you are doing, a little bit more about the context of each country. And that is what the global school is really based on. Because you are all from different regions and different indigenous peoples, and this is the part where you get to learn about each other and each other's contexts and the various issues that you are struggling with. And of course, this can take us to a way of identifying and planning and confronting these similar issues in various places. Different indigenous peoples, even though we are in different parts of the world, are often going through similar issues that, as you will see in your advocacy plans. So we want to invite you, whoever is the first today, then can tell us about your work. And we'll take a little bit more time today so that we can move ahead. And we'll also give a few more minutes to each of the next presenters that come up in the next few days. Now, remember, this is not a test. Don't get nervous. Just feel free to share with you what you've been working on during these few weeks with your advisors. The first participant that I have, well, I want you to go ahead and take the floor.
Hello, all.
And let us know if you want us to share your presentation or if you can do it from your computer, whichever works best for you.
Okay. I think this is okay. Okay. So my advocacy plan is about forest conservation for the health and well-being of Indigenous women.
Irene?
Yes. Yeah.
Can you please introduce yourself before you start with your advocacy plan?
Sorry.
Yeah, so for the rest of also before you start, please introduce yourself so that we know who you are, where you're from, and then you can start with your plan.
Okay, my name is Irene Maineye. I'm from Kenya. Yeah. I don't know if that's okay, Vinny. I can.
Yeah, that's fine. Just go ahead. It's okay.
Sorry about that. Now, my advocacy plan is about forest conservation for the health and well-being of Indigenous women. My main focus is in Kenya. It's in Kenya, in Narok County, in Nyekweri Forest, which is in Kimintet Ward. Nyekweri Forest is the largest and remaining forest in Transmara, and it forms part of the dispersal areas of the Masai Mara National Reserve. After the land sublocation and division, local land owners who are mainly from the Masai community invite outsiders to provide labor in cutting trees and clear the land for agriculture. In turn, these laborers receive their payments from sales of charcoal that they make, while the owners get 25% of the money. In dry areas, farmers cut trees, mainly the indigenous trees, for charcoal, and we all know that when indigenous trees are cut, the traditional medicinal plants are lost, our environment is affected. We begin to have like conflicts because of the struggle between we now have conflicts between the people and the animals around. Next, please. Next slide. Now, Indigenous women play a vital role in preservation of the forest and protection of their lands. They have a unique knowledge, skills, and preservative perspectives that are essential to addressing the complex challenges of deforestation and climate change. However, they often face significant barriers to their full participation and leadership, including discrimination, marginalization, and lack of access, resource, and education. Indigenous women are the most affected since when the forest cover is lost, water catchment areas are affected, which results to drying up of the rivers, They are forced to travel for long distances to fetch water, which exposes them to a lot of risk, food scarcity, loss of indigenous and medicinal trees, soil erosion, but their voices are often unheard and in policy making and decision making progress. Now, my advocacy will empower Indigenous women by amplifying their voices and advocating for policies that address the intersectionality of Indigenous women's rights and climate change. Next. Now here is a map. As you can see at the lower end here, we have the map of Kenya. Then the red part here is where my focus is. Yeah, next. Now we have several effects of charcoal burning on Indigenous women. We have the health effects, economic effects, social effects, environmental effects, and these effects generally affect Indigenous women, and the negative of charcoal burning on Indigenous women highlights the need for sustainable and equitable resources management practices that take into account the social and economic impacts of charcoal production. So next. Next, please. So we have the legal and political frameworks. One, we have the Forest Conservation Management Act 2016. This act provides for the conservation, protection, and management of forest and their resources here in Kenya. It prohibits unauthorized logging, clearing, and burning of forests without permit from the Kenya Forest Service. It also provides for penalties for those who convent the law. We have the Forest Policy 2015. This is a framework for sustainable management of the Kenya forest resource. It promotes conservation and protection of the forest, the rehabilitation of degraded forest, and the sustainable utilization of the resource. It also recognizes the rights of the community to participate in forest management. Next. We have the Environmental Management and Coordination Act. We also have the National Charcoal Strategy. Each of these promotes the sustainable and the protection of forests in general. Next. We have the Constitution of Kenya. The Constitution of Kenya has laws and policies that provide a legal and political framework for the regulation of charcoal burning and logging in Kenya. They aim to promote sustainable forest management practice and protects the rights of community while ensuring conservation of forest and their resources. Next. We have the international treaty bodies, that is the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. We also have the CBD, Convention on Biological Diversity. All these aim the CBD aims to conserve the biodiversity and ensure its sustainable use. And the United Nations Framework Conservation on Climate Change, it address climate change. Forests are an important component of effort to mitigate changes because they absorb and source of carbon dioxide. Next. My main objective is to raise awareness and promote actions toward forest conservation, specifically highlighting the role of Indigenous women in protecting and preserving the forest. Next. My goals are to raise awareness about the impact of climate change and deforestation on Indigenous women, to advocate for policies that address the needs and the rights of Indigenous women in climate change adaptation and mitigation, to empower Indigenous women to lead in their communities, take leadership roles, and be decision makers. Through this, they can advocate for sustainable practices, protect their forests from harmful exploitation, and implement climate-friendly initiatives. Partner with Indigenous women to create sustainable and equitable solutions that benefit both communities, the community, and the environment. Next. Next, please. No, so here I have the key messages that forest is crucial for the survival and well-being of all living beings, and their conservation is crucial to mitigate climate change and ensure sustainable development. Indigenous women play a crucial role in forest conservation as they have a deep connection with the forest and possess traditional knowledge and practices that have been passed down to from generation to generation. The rights of Indigenous women should be respected, and their participation in decision making related to forest conservation should be ensured. Next. For those institutions that can be influenced, we have the national and the local government. When I say the local government, I mean maybe the county governments. We have the National Environment Management Authority, that is NEMA here in Kenya. We have the Kenya Forest Service. We have NGOs, different NGOs. We have the Ministry of Environment and Forestry and the community at large. This will protect all state of forest by creating awareness, promoting forest education, and training the community on the importance. And also it will enforce condition and regulation pertaining local logging, charcoal burning, and other forest utilization activities. Apprehend and prosecute violators of forest laws and regulation. Next. Next, please. The expected outcomes after this is done, we will have increased the awareness among policymakers, government officials, NGOs, and the general public about the impacts of charcoal burning, especially on Indigenous women and girls. Will increase representation of Indigenous women in making decisions, processes related to charcoal burning and logging, adoption of policies and programs that address the need and the rights of Indigenous women in climate change and mitigation, increase empowerment of Indigenous women to take leadership roles in climate action. Next. We will have some activities. One, we will conduct training, train Indigenous women and the community around about forest conservation and its importance. We'll also train them on alternative ways of getting income to sustain their families instead of doing charcoal burning and logging. Train them on tree planting so that they can replace the trees that have been cut already, and maybe provide them with tree seedlings to at least bring back the forest that was there. Next. We have the analysis of the organization. We have some strengths. Our organization has worked with the community. Therefore, we have, therefore it's well known, and by hence their trust. This makes it easy to carry our advocacy program. Our organization has a strong network with the community leaders, women groups, and girls. So it will be easy for us to conduct this advocacy. The weakness is we have maybe limited capacity. Yeah, next. Opportunities. The women in the community around are not well informed the effects of charcoal burning, because some of them just agree for people to come cut trees in their locality. They don't know the effects, but at least this will give us space to create more awareness and train them on this. The organization could also partner with the local and international organization to access funding and support the community in sustainable practices and skill development. Threats, rejection from the community, since this advocacy focuses on getting rid of the charcoal burning now. Because the community, some people depend on this, they burn charcoal so that they can earn a living. So maybe some people will reject this now. The advocacy will take like 3 months. Next. The networks that we have grassroots organizations, small groups. We have Naserian Saparingo Women Group, Olerian Conservancy, and the Masai Moran Conservancies. All these are around that Nyikweri Forest. They're in the Mara Triangle. Next. A requirement for this, it will take time. We'll need funds, materials, the target group to enable the project activities to be implemented. Next. Yeah, we have the gender, intergenerational, and intersectionalities and intercultural approaches analysis. This initiative will be inclusive, incorporating a variety of stakeholders, including the national government, the municipality, the county governments, women, girls, young people, men, elders, by bringing Indigenous women and girls concerned on board and promoting both financial and moral support toward their needs, will lead to a communal sustainable development in the spirit of leaving no one behind. Indigenous women, Indigenous girls, local leaders, as well as the elderly, disabled people, and the children in the community will benefit directly from this. Next. It's the end. I think that's the end. Thank you.
Thank you, Irene, for sharing with us that. So, Cecilia, can I call upon you to give your comments first? Okay. Okay, as we wait for Cecilia Joy, maybe you can give your comments.
Thank you, Winnie, and thank you, Irene. I'll switch off my video because it looks like I have very low connectivity. Okay. So, Irene, thank you so much for presenting your plan and sending it to us on time. Before I go to my feedback, I would like to congratulate you for a very well formulated plan. I liked how you started the whole thing with the legal and political frameworks that are in place. then you've clearly defined your objectives and also mapped the key stakeholders and the other players in your advocacy plan. You've also clearly mentioned, so you are clear of what you want to do in this advocacy plan, and you're also clear about what you would like to achieve from this advocacy plan. So you've mentioned that clearly in the expected outcomes, which I liked. And also you've done a SWOT analysis of your organization. So you clearly, you know exactly what are the strengths and the weaknesses of your organization in helping you implement this advocacy plan. So I think that is very important before we go ahead with any kind of political advocacy, because then that gives us a wider vision and also let us know where we stand in, if we need to connect with anyone or if we need to lobby for any kind of advocacy, any kind of issue that we would like to carry forward. I also liked the fact that you had the gender intersectionality component to it, and that perspective has clearly been defined in your advocacy plan. But just a few things, Irene, these are questions to you. Maybe you can just go, you don't have to answer, but these are just questions that I'm putting forward, and maybe you can go and just rethink about these few points that I will be mentioning now. So you've mentioned that you would like to advocate for policies, right, as one of your goals. Maybe we can think of how you would support this. What kind of data would you be using, or what kind of qualitative inputs would you be giving to advocate for these policies? You've also mentioned about having all of these monitoring and evaluation and follow up for basically a monitoring plan for your plan. So who will support you in this implementation? Would your organization be working alone in this, or would you also have other people, other experts who would kind of come and do that impact assessment for your plan? You've mentioned also that, if I'm not mistaken, that you will develop a curriculum, a training curriculum that covers topics related to the negative impact of charcoal burning and logging on the environment and the importance of sustainable practices. So who will design this curriculum? Will you be involving experts in this topic? Will you be involving other organizations? Will you be taking it to your government to vet this particular curriculum? And how will this be sustainable? Will it only be used for this particular advocacy plan, or does your organization, plans to conduct this training throughout the duration of the year? Then you've also mentioned that you will conduct case studies. Just 1 minute. Yes, you've mentioned that you will also conduct case studies. So maybe if this can also be elaborated, how, when, who will support you in this, and how will this be used for making your advocacy effective? So those are my basic questions for you, Irene. You don't have to answer, but maybe just to think about them. Thank you, Irene.
Thank you, Joy. I'll take that into consideration. Thanks.
Thank you, Joy. Orte, do you have any comments for Irene?
Bueno, yo también me uno a las felicitaciones.
Yes, I also congratulate you, knowing that arriving at this moment hasn't been easy for the participants. For some of them, combining work and participation in this process has been difficult. And About the advocacy plan that was presented, I also want to express how much I value that you have taken the issue of the participation of Indigenous women on the conservation of forests. Perhaps it has been done over history, but when we talk about training women about forest conservation, that is a very important issue. And we know that this process will be a combination of knowledge, technical knowledge, to strengthen the work done by women. I believe that besides what Joy already shared, I would mention how to perhaps be a little bit more specific. When we talk about forest conservation, there are a lot of issues there. Of course, you already know the legal framework at the national level, at specific level. So perhaps I would mention just defining more specifically the added value of this issue. If women already play an important role, what would be its relevance? I know that it's a very broad subject, but perhaps think about the fact that if they already play an important role in this issue, what would be the added value of implementing this plan to the activity that women are already carrying out? So I would highlight that the relevance of your advocacy plan, if implemented, to the work that women have already been carrying out. That will really be my only comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Arthur. Cecilia, do you have any comments?
Gracias, Winnie. I'm gonna try to provide general comments according to the that I reach, to these plans that I reach previous days, and you share with me. First of all, I like to congratulate all of you for your work, dedication during these weeks. I'm always try to invite you to implement the activities. And also my invitation is that you have to have clear your objectives and who will support you. Most of the times we need a few resources, financial resources. And the most important is that we have the support that our sisters, and we need to have a clear objective, a clear set of activities, and work together, always work together with the community, your plans are relevant because you are part of your community. You know the issue, you know the challenges that you have to solve, that you have to confront. And this is the important point, because when other actors like the government or others want to give us solutions, they don't work because they are viewing the problematic or the issues outside of the context. And in this case, you know your context, you know the challenges that you have, you know the problem. And this is so this is important for me, in my opinion. At the end of the presentations and the next weeks, we are gonna analyze your plans and also how you were engaged in this program. Why? Because we from FIMI would like to support your entire or part of your activities. And also, we are gonna, FIMI will provide financial resources for your plans. That's why we would like that you have clear your activities. What will you do? Where? And when? Because sometimes we want to solve many issues, and it is not possible. We have to go step by step, and it works. So when we solve something, we are gonna find other issues, other challenges. But the important that we, as advisors, from my position, the important that we see with this assignment that you had is that we can see your commitment and this assignment. And this is a first point that we have to confidence on FIMI will provide the resources. Because the next stage is another one. You have to know, or you learn how to manage financial resources. The experience has learned or has show us that that you get experience or get learnings with the implementation of your plan. And also previous participants, when they going through this experience, they also have had the opportunity to access to more funds, international funds. So it's my invitation that you could take this assignment as an opportunity for not only as an like common exercise or common assignment. It's my invitation that you could think this plan, the plan that you prepare, as a plan that you are able to implement with or without FIMI financial or FIMI funds. Thank you, Winnie.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Cecilia, for those comments. And please, sisters, take that into account even as you continue to work and finalize on your advocacy plans. What I wanted to share with Irene, in addition to the comments that you've received previously, is in some of the outcomes that you mentioned, is that you mentioned influence of policy or involving policymakers, but in the activities that you have, there aren't activities that are targeted towards policymakers or the government. So again, this is also not just for Irene, but also a general comment for everyone. Make sure that the expected outcomes that you want to see have to be connected to the activities that you're going to carry out have to be related to the outcomes that you want to see. So, for instance, if you want to see policy change, one of the activities that you carry out has to be one that influences policy or involves policymakers, so that you're able to make that change or make that influence in policy. And again, I just want to reiterate that about the budget. Whenever you're doing an advocacy plan, please think about the budget that you have at hand, so that you know how to narrow down and be very specific on the activities that you can carry out. Because just as Cecilia has mentioned, sometimes you will have this advocacy plan that will be brilliant, but it's going to cost so much money that you might not be able to have access to all that money. So please be as specific as possible and realistic when you're doing your advocacy plan. When you're thinking about the activities, keep at the back of your mind what the budget you have at hand is and what is accessible to you. Also, when we're mentioning, who will support you or who will be who will support you during the implementation of your advocacy plan, as Cecilia has mentioned, that FIMI is going to provide partial or full support for your advocacy plans, but you can also find other organizations that would want to partner with you to carry out the advocacy plan, so that they can also provide funds that will be complemented by what you will receive from FIMI. And then also let us know that when you're presenting your advocacy plan, because previously there has been some people who've been who have had external support that has complemented or worked hand in hand with the funds that you would receive from FIMI. So again, just to repeat, please think about the budget when you're thinking about the activities you want to carry out. Think about the capacity you have in your own organizations when you're thinking about the activity. Is it something that you would actually be able to do? Is it within your power to do it? Do you have enough support within your organization or with the organizations that are going to support you to carry out the advocacy plan? So please keep those things at the back of your mind while you're doing your advocacy plan or when you're going to finalize the plans. Yeah, so I think that's what those are some of the comments that I had. Thank you, Irene, for that. We'll continue to work together to finalize the plan. And I also just want to congratulate you and all the other sisters for the work you've put in doing the advocacy plan, the time you've taken, and the thought that has gone into doing the advocacy plans. And I wish all of you the best as you do your presentations and as you finalize and finally, hopefully, be able to implement this plan. And so, yes, we're going to move to the next session, which I will hand over to Earth Day. to take over, and then we can proceed with the other plans. So Hortensia, please go ahead. Thank you, everyone.
Gracias, Winnie.
Thank you,
Después
Winnie. After listening to the presentation of the first advocacy plan from Irene, we congratulate you again and we recognize your effort, and we're happy that you've concluded this phase. So now we're going to know other plans worked on by other participants. And at any time, we're going to have with us a guest who is also going to give you feedback. It's going to give you, it's going to give feedback on the ones we're going to present today. Next. So today we're going to know about 4 plans. And for the time that we have today, we're going to distribute the time. So you will have 15 minutes for each presentation. We have 3 left to present today. So maybe about 15 minutes. And I think that that would be appropriate. And each one of us can also make suggestions. And our guest today is going to be Hast. Hast Largo. She's going to be with us any moment now. We're going to introduce her once she joins. And as I said, or as our colleague said, don't worry, today you're just presenting the work you've done so far. Thank you so much, Hast.
Well, welcome. And thank you so much for accepting our invitation, Hast. We are so glad to be able to know that with your experience, you're going to be able to give recommendations and therefore give feedback to each one of the plans presented today. Hast Largo is from Colombia, from a city called Manizales, but currently she's living in Armenia, which is a touristic city and a coffee city. Hast is a public accountant specialist in auditing. She has more than 20 years of experience in financial and administrative areas in the private sector and with the seed project of IPAF and the INE fund. For these years, she's been reviewing reports from several organizations, trying to be the best support possible in the construction of proposals and writing of financial and narrative reports. And she's also accompanying these processes in the implementation period if necessary. So Hast has a long history, and we want to take advantage of her comments and recommendations and suggestions for the plans that will be presented today. So welcome, Hast. And we will have approximately 15 minutes for each presentation. And you will have 15 minutes for your comments and recommendations. And feel free to say anything you need to be able to strengthen the plans that you are seeing. So right now we want to listen to our participant, Regina Yutitansari. She's from the Asian region and she's going to present her plan. So Regina, deep breath. And you're on. Welcome. And thank you so much for sharing your plan with us today. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Hortensia. Should I share my own presentation or my presentation will be shared from your end?
Sí puede ser, como usted se sienta mejor.
Depending on what you think is best. If your internet allows it, then you can post it yourself. Otherwise, we can do it.
I think it will be better if you do it because my internet connection is not really good, actually.
Muy bien, ya lo tenemos ahí.
Okay, we have it up on screen now.
Okay, thank you so much. So my name is Regina. I'm from Indonesia and my institution is Institute Jayakologi. We work on a documentation and protection of Dayak indigenous people's lands and rights. So my advocacy plan today, the title is Strengthening Role of Women in Protections to Existence of Ancestral Land and Right of Dayak Indigenous Peoples and Indigenous Territories in Benua Tanjung. It is it consists of 3 villages, which is Tangerang, Teluk Runja, and Sidahari, and then Kampung Selat Hulu and Batamna in Ketapang Regency in West Kalimantan, Indonesia. Next. Next, please. So I will explain the problem that faced by the people in the community. So the authority of the customary institution as the upholder of customary law and as the authority holder over the ancestral land is weak, and then not all ancestral land have had suitable land use planning. And then the next is not all companies have imposed customary law that ban selling ancestral land to outsiders, and formal legal recognition over the existence of ancestral land of Jalain Kendawangan indigenous community is yet obtained. Then the indigenous peoples who are the right owner of ancestral land still lack of self-confidence. Ancestral land have not been managed in the most optimum manner for generating alternative income, and also indigenous women and youth have not adequate capacity in managing indigenous territories and natural resources for sustainability. I think I lost it. And the next problem is women have no sufficient capacity to pass on culture to young people around generations, and young people around generation have no awareness in the importance of protecting cultural heritage and knowledge. So there are like 9 problems that I tried to address in this advocacy plan, which is actually is not start from zero. Actually, we already, for example, in Kampung Batu Manang and Silat Hulu, we already obtained the region decree on the recognition of the indigenous community. So we would, I would continue to get recognition from the Ministry of Environment and Forestry to get recognition for their forest, indigenous forests. So it's ongoing process. Next. Next, please. The objectives of this advocacy plan is to increase the number of indigenous territories or indigenous forest maps in all facilitated areas of IDS Institute Jayakologi, my organization, particularly in 3 empowered villages in Ketapang district. So increase the number of protected indigenous forest on community or the settlement area of Dayak Jalai, and at least 70% of the my organization facilitated area, particularly the 3 empowered villages in Ketapang. So increase the number of protected indigenous forests and community. I think it's double. So, and then the last one is strengthening the role of women in natural resources management and children on importance of protecting indigenous territories and natural resource management. So this is DAHAS is a kind of forest management, like the by the local knowledge of indigenous the Dayak indigenous people. So they will like, because we have a culture shifting cultivation. So when we cut down the forest, we will plant rice and then we replanting it with, for example, like fruits and rubbers, and like we always think about biodiversity. So it's not like a monoculture. So we will do the same year by year. So it is very rare that we will do replanting the land that we replant before. So we make sure that every forest come back to become forest for a few years. The next. So the expected result is the indigenous peoples of Dayak Jalai and Kendawangan in Benua Tanjung, Kampung Silat Hulu, and Batu Menang have success and freedom in managing their indigenous territories for livelihood according to their knowledge and traditions. And indigenous peoples in Benua Tanjung, Kampung Silat Hulu, and Kampung Batu Menang have legal, formal, and customary law recognition and protection for their territories, indigenous forests, local knowledge, livelihood, and existence as indigenous peoples. And the indigenous women and youth have adequate capacity in managing indigenous territories and natural resources for sustainability. Women have sufficient capacity to pass on culture to young people or young generation. Young people have an awareness on the importance of protecting culture, heritage, and knowledge. And indigenous women are capable and have a common understanding in maintaining and managing their indigenous territories. The rights of indigenous women are recognized and respected in decision making of meeting at the village level and are involved in the formulation of village regulation on the management of indigenous territories. The indigenous women group as means of organizing themselves and urging to government to issue the local regulation or region decree on the determination and recognition of indigenous territory. And the last one is synergy and solidarity of indigenous women groups to urge the government on issuing local regulation or regions decree on indigenous territory and its management models in West Kalimantan is increased. So what I would like to work on women is, so for now we're working on the 3 community. So through this project, I hope that there are more women from another village or another community will join the women of these 3 villages. So I hope like by training the women in these 3 villages, so the women from these 3 villages can also share the knowledge to the neighborhoods, the village. So it will like continue like that. So another one will get another knowledge from one another. So that's why we need a synergy and solidarity from the women. Next. So this is the activities. The the objective is to increase the number of indigenous territories, indigenous forest maps, and also so the activities is strengthening of indigenous territories and system of natural resources management through the following activities. The first is community workshop on benefits and role of map as an advocacy tools, community training on indigenous territories and indigenous forests, participatory mapping, socialization on indigenous territories for sector mapping, lobby aim at policy or recognition and validation of indigenous territories map, and facilitating the process of recognition of indigenous territories and system management of natural resources management according to the policies issued by the government. It was law number 8 of 2014 on community village and the court decision number 35 on indigenous forests. Next. And then the second objective is to increase the number of protected indigenous forests and community settlement in at least 70% of the IAD facilitated areas, particularly the 3 empowered villages in Ketapang district, where the village indigenous territories remain intact. So the activities are conducting workshop on managing indigenous territories, environment and climate change mitigation and adaptation, facilitating the establishment and management of DAHAs, including preliminary community assessment, consultation meeting with communities, analysis on laws and policies related to the community village and indigenous forests, and focus group discussion with sector of the community, elders, women, and youth. Next. So, and then this one is quite much like strengthening the rules of women in natural resources management. And children are important of protecting indigenous territories and natural resources management. So conducting FGD on women in natural resources management, conduct training on gender equality, critical law, and human rights, conduct training on alternative income generation for women in partnership with credit union, facilitated women alternative income generation group, socializing on the importance of protecting indigenous territories and natural resources management, and partner school of ID. So we have a few partner school where we teach local content knowledge, especially the Dayak people, the Dayak indigenous people tradition. So we give some material to school and let them teach them. So we're going to use the school to help with this advocacy plan. To conduct early dissemination of the project to the indigenous peoples in the 3 villages mentioned before, study a model of indigenous territory management by indigenous women, advocacy and campaign tools on managing indigenous territory based on local knowledge, facilitated the training of indigenous women on understanding the role and division of work between women and men, gender analysis, conduct workshop for indigenous community on the impact of climate change on the sustainability of indigenous women's source of income. And then indigenous women workshop on understanding women's right on the management of indigenous territories and the legal rules and policy involved. To conduct legal training for indigenous women on understanding the regulation and policies, national, local, and customary, that accommodate their rights on the management of indigenous territories. And then workshop for indigenous community to formulate customary agreement involving indigenous women on indigenous territories management based on local knowledge. And a workshop on establishment of indigenous women's group as means of organizing themselves on managing and supporting the protection and recognition of customary territories. Facilitated meeting of indigenous women for alternative income generation, development planning as a form of commitment and participation of women on protecting indigenous territories. So we have credit union here where we provide some fund for alternative income generation for indigenous peoples. It's not only for women, but also for men groups or for a mixed groups. So when they have the groups for when they form a group for alternative income generation, the credit union will help them to give a fund to start their own business. And then conduct regular discussion with alternative income generation group of indigenous women for land preparation, seedling and planting of high value economic crops, facilitation consolidation among indigenous women groups to make mutual agreement, recommendation on urging the government to issue local regulation or region decree on the determination and recognition of indigenous territories. And then engage indigenous women actively in various networking activities. I think that's all from me. And as mentioned before, that this actually not start from zero. We already have some recognitions, and for the alternative income generation group, we already have some group also. So by having this advocacy plan, I do hope to forming more groups and more network for women. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, Regina, por presentar.
Thank you, Regina, for presenting your plan. We know that we would like to resolve many things, but I think we have to keep in mind the time that we have. Thank you so much for this effort and for this work that you're already doing. At the end of the presentation, we'll have the comments and recommendations from HAST, so you can get some feedback and enrich your advocacy plan. So first, however, we're going to listen now to Joneri's plan. Joneri's from Nicaragua, from the Latin American region. Welcome, Jonetti. The floor is yours and you can present your plan. So welcome to this space. Good morning. Could you share the screen for me, please? As well, Hortensia already introduced me, but I'm Jonetti and I'm from Nicaragua, specifically from the autonomous region of the Caribbean coast in the north. And I will be presenting my advocacy plan today, which will be talking about my future. I don't see the presentation on screen. Should I share it? Oh, there it is. Thank you. So the advocacy plan talks about a better future for Miskito girls. And Miskitos is the indigenous population here where I live. The next page, please. As an introduction, I say that this advocacy plan is a result of my participation in the 10th edition of the Global Leadership School for Indigenous Women of the International Forum of Indigenous Women, FEME. And so it's an opportunity to contribute to awakening girls, teenagers, and women, Indigenous women in the community, because they have the right to make their own decisions about their own lives and to begin a process of transformation in and outside of the family environment. In Nicaragua, as in many countries, we are seeing a normalization of different kinds of violence, which is one of the huge problems affecting Nicaraguan girls and teenagers. And it's, I'm focusing on the forced marriage of girls and adolescents with very little information about their reproductive health and rights. The first sexual relationship of 1 of 3 girls happens too early, before 18 years of age. This is 35.2% of the cases And so there's an early or a too early sexual union, which cuts off opportunities for the girls. Next page, please. And there are a number of taboos about sexual and reproductive rights. And so the Mesquita culture doesn't really have a good way to talk about sexual and reproductive rights. And this is a problem that needs to be talked about. They're sensitive topics, but they're important so that girls and teenagers can have full access to information. Teenagers, girls, have very little decision about their bodies and planning of their maternity as a consequence of factors associated with gender-based violence, because they are pressured through the social norms and imaginaries based on traditional practices that discriminate socially against women who break with the established gender norms. As a justification, I think it's important to talk about these issues, to raise awareness among girls appropriately with cultural sensitivity. And at the implementation of this advocacy plan, seeks to empower Mezquita indigenous teenagers and girls in the city of Bilwi in Puerto Cabezas in Nicaragua about their sexual and reproductive rights, about themselves, about autonomy, that helps them to initiate a process that will help them to have life projects and recreational spaces. With this initiative, I'm hoping to create a group of at least 20 girls and teenagers who will be empowered with more knowledge about their human rights, sexual rights, and specific rights and individual rights and collective rights as women and indigenous peoples, so that they can take on leadership in the future in the development of their community. We want to have healthy girls and teenagers who make full use of their sexual and reproductive rights. We also want to give girls and teenagers and indigenous women and young women and disabled women to be able to dream about their own life plans and to exercise their rights and to have a dignified life within their community and to make decisions about their own lives. Next page, please. As a general objective, we have to contribute to the comprehensive empowerment of Mezquita indigenous women for the exercise of their sexual and reproductive rights with cultural specificity, cultural competence. Where specific objectives would be to promote a process of education about their human rights, sexual and reproductive rights, individual and collective rights as women and as indigenous peoples. Finally, to promote a simultaneous process about the creation of their life projects that are also culturally competent. Next page, please. In terms of strategies for advocacy, we're promoting recreational activities as well as creative workshops with dance, theater, and traditional games with topics of sexual and reproductive rights, body autonomy, because the organization where I'm working has worked a lot on these kinds of workshops of theater, helping girls to think about themselves, also things like cultural dances from our own culture. And these are ways of getting more into our target population. In terms of topics of sexual and reproductive rights, we're going to talk about self-respect and self-esteem, and the fact that they have the right to make decisions about their own lives and to create their life plans. We're going to apply a methodology that's coherent to consistent with the age, cultural, and reality of the participants. It's important also that we're going to be working with girls and teenagers who are disabled as well, because these topics are also going to be part of spaces where they can participate and not have so many limitations. We need to have bilingual communication, and this involves having guests and opinion leaders from the neighborhoods to talk about the problems in their sectors. And we're also wanting to organize a support group inside the collective so that we can have a more participative and detailed work plan. We need to talk about the context that Mezquita girls and teenagers are living in. A lot of these topics are taboo, as I've mentioned before. The next page, please. As expected results, we will take advantage of the abilities and capacities that exist already within the women's collective, which is called La Payula. Women who have experience in the development of these types of processes and experiences with these topics, taking into account the social, cultural, and economic realities of the context. We're going to have a multidisciplinary team, and we'll have a facilitator for each workshop. Next page, please. For my budget, I have a total of $5,040. This includes the project expenses, including administrative expenses for workshops and all of that. It also includes $416 for project staff. Sorry, for 416. Next page, please. Well, this is just a thank you. Thank you very much for your attention. Yes, thanks for listening. Thank you, Janetti, for your participation, for your presentation. We know we still have time to strengthen our work as well. And we realize all the implications for our territories. We're going to have some time for comment on this plan later with our invited guests today. But finally, we're going to hear the presentation of Brittany Marian. She is from Peru, from the Latin American region, and she will also have the opportunity to present her plan. And thank you for being here. Welcome, Brittany.
Sister, how are you? Welcome. Again, I'm going to present my own slides because I have expanded the SWOT analysis. So I didn't know whether we would have time or not. So I believe we do. So I'm going to present that. Can you see my presentation? Yes, we can see it. Okay, great. I will start introducing myself first. My name is Brittany Mariana Pereira Pasa. I am from Peru. I represent the organization of Indigenous Aymara Youth Union, and Huila means young blood. That is the title of my advocacy plan, which is called Huila Kanamaskip. And it means young blood at work. So I'll go first. Oh, let me see. I can't see. Can you see it if I present it this way? Otherwise, I can't see the slides. Can you at least read it, perhaps? Yes, we can read it. Sorry, otherwise I can't see it. All right. So, okay, great. The problems that I have identified for this advocacy plan are three problems, very specific. The first one is the lack of knowledge of the individual, collective, and specific rights of Indigenous peoples and Indigenous women on the part of women, children, and young people. This problem we found in a poll by the Education Department in Peru in 2017, where we saw percentages of people who feel discriminated against and people who have been discriminated against at health posts, municipalities, police stations. So what we want with this plan is to provide workshops because of this lack of knowledge of their rights. Many Indigenous people don't know their rights. They don't know the work that has been done outside at the UN, and all of the legal frameworks were included, and the laws of our own country were already included at the local level, regional, national, and international levels as well. So this is one of our basic problems that we are taking into account, and that is the lack of knowledge of individual, collective, and specific rights of Indigenous peoples. The second problem we have is the progressive loss of the important elements of cultural identity, such as the Aymara language. And this happens specifically, especially in childhood and among the youth. This is connected to discrimination that our entire society suffers within the Peruvian society. The third problem is connected to the second problem, and that is the evident lack of awareness of the importance of conserving native languages. So if we focus on these three main problems that we've identified for this advocacy plan, I've moved next to the social features. So that is an analysis of our society, how our society is living, perceiving this issue to then connect it with our problem. One of the main ones, as I already mentioned, was this poll, this survey by the Ministry of Culture. And the results showed that 53% of those surveyed consider that Peruvians are racist. And more than 50% has felt discriminated or very discriminated against. On the second point, we have places where we have felt discriminated. 22% of those surveyed felt discriminated at health posts. How is it possible to feel discriminated against at health posts when this is a fundamental right that we have? This is also connected with not having knowledge of the rights that we have, be it to present claims, to present reports against those public servants who are violating our rights. 19% feel discriminated against at police stations. This is another important point, and that is so inappropriate that we feel discriminated against when we a place where we go to present claims when our rights are violated, be it a rape or any other serious case that we're going to present, but we feel discriminated against at these places. So 14% have felt discriminated against at municipalities. Municipalities is supposed to be a body that represents us. It's one that makes our voices known because they're supposed to have been elected by a vote to represent us. But yes, our representatives themselves discriminate against us. This is also due to the lack of knowledge that we ourselves have about our rights. About the rights that we have, we need to know that. But this happens through information, intercultural information, information given in our languages, adequate for us indigenous peoples, and completely focused on us. Why? Because all populations are different. We all have a different way of understanding and relating to each other. We also have to understand the motives of this discrimination. 31% of those surveyed feel discriminated against because of their income level. This survey also shows us that the large rural population in Peru is discriminated against because of their income level. That is, rural populations are considered as the A group, that is the lowest level is of poverty, and it represents extreme poverty. So they're discriminated against because they belong to this group. So 26% are also discriminated against because of the way they speak. This is the second problem that I had mentioned before. preserving the Aymara language. All indigenous peoples, all who speak as two languages, one the native language and the other one, in the case of Peru, we have Aymara and Castilian, which is spoken in southern Peru. We feel discrimination because they give us a nickname when we speak. The Aymara language only has 3 vowels and Castilian has 5. And that is where we see a change in pronunciation. And that is where one goes to the city and may confuse a word, or they pronounce a word with a different letter and they say that we have el mote. It is a nickname that is negative, and that is how they discriminate against us. The other one, 25%, feel discriminated against because of the way we dress. So I have felt this myself because of the way I dress. Here we have the ability of using a blanket to cover ourselves from our waist down when it's cold. And I've been discriminated against for dressing that way. It is really unfortunate. And because of this discrimination, important elements of our culture are being lost, such as language and the way we dress. Another motive, another reason why we're discriminated against is the physical features and the color of our skin. So I wanted to touch on these issues. Also, 59% believes that the Aymara and Quechua populations are discriminated against or very much discriminated against in Peru. This is felt in the rural sector and the city sector, urban sector, and 59% believe that those two populations are the most discriminated against. Another important point that I wanted to show you to give you more context is that according to the Ministry of Culture, we know that in Peru, the Cepita district of the Puno department has a total population of 17,402 people. And I would like, that was in the year 2020. Cepita is my native district, is in Peru, all the way in the south at the border with Bolivia. And my organization is from the province of Coyón, an hour and 20 minutes more or less from Cepita district. So in this advocacy plan, I wanted to focus on my native district and that of my organization, which is El Ave and Cepita. Those are the 2 districts. That's why I mentioned the population. So 17,402 people in year 2020, and of them say they speak but not write. 15,450 say they speak but not write the Aymara language. According to another survey on indigenous people, that's how we got the number. So the majority speak the Aymara language, but they do not write it. So we need to keep this in mind, the fact that the current population in the Cepita district compared to the population in the department of Puno, which is 1,173,000 people, or compared just with the district of Puno, which is 128,630 people, this means that it is a really small amount. Only the rural area speaks the Aymara language, but not at the capital cities where students, young people move to because they're looking for an education. So we need to keep this in mind, that young people and children are more in the areas to study in the capital cities. and bigger cities. We also know that the district of Yave has a population of 48,729 people, but 34,010 say that they speak but don't write Aymara. So we can see that this population is a little smaller compared to the one in Cepita. And this is because the Cepita area is even more rural than the other one. We have also seen that the native language is mostly in, or is seen more in the rural sector, more than in the capital cities. So if we take into account the entire population of the Puno department or the Peru, we can see that the percentage of people who speak the language is really small. It's minimal. So the justification for this advocacy plan is as follows. So this advocacy plan is going to address discrimination, as we mentioned. That is how important it is to acquire knowledge on human rights, individual rights, collective rights, and specific to women and indigenous peoples. This is very important to eliminate through the population this discrimination. The second justification is that it is very important to strengthen our culture through the preservation of native languages. In this case, we're talking about the Aymara language. This is the native language, native of southern Peru, and specifically the Puno department. This is very important to preserve our culture in time. Another point that strengthens also the first and second points is to make the population aware of the importance of preserving our native languages. As I had mentioned, the survey by the Ministry of Culture in 2017, we saw that 26% of those surveyed felt discriminated against because of the way they speak. This means that children, indigenous children and women speak two languages, the Castilian language and the Aymara language. The discrimination is considered a threat for the Aymara language and native languages. So let's talk about the legal framework. Brittany, I'm sorry to interrupt, but your time is coming up, so you have only a couple more minutes. So if please, I need you to wrap up. You can go to the main portion in just 1 minute. In the legal framework, we have several regional order with the priority of preventing racism and all acts of discrimination. At the national level, we have several laws also that have to do with native languages and preserving them. And at the international level, we have the CEDAW and the General Recommendation 39, the Declaration of the United Nations on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, the Sustainable Development Objectives. The areas where we're going to advocate are workshops, and the population will be children, boys and girls, youth and women. The main objectives that we have are: the general one is to promote individual, collective, and human rights and women's rights, indigenous people's rights through our native languages. Yeah, the interpreter apologizes, but Brittany is reading extremely fast, so it's very difficult to follow. I apologize, Brittany, but your time is up. So we don't have the ability to continue. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to hear the recommendations by our expert. So we apologize. Perhaps this is also a suggestion for those who are left to please focus on the main points of our presentations, and so that we can listen to the recommendations. We apologize again, and we now give the floor quickly to our expert, our guest today has. Please proceed. And if you're kind also to take into account the advocacy plan by Irene to give her recommendations as well. We know that you were not present at her presentation, but if you have any recommendations, if you had it before, if you can comment on the 4 plans, please go ahead. Thank you so much. And we apologize again to Irene. We are very sorry. Thank you, Hortensia. Thank you, everyone, for inviting me. It's an honor to be here with you today, sharing this space. It is not the first time I come to the school, and I'm very grateful for the invitation. So I'm going to speak about the 4 plans. I was not present at Irene's, but I did see it. I read it, and I have some notes on that. So first of all, I'd like to say that these comments that I'm going to make, I make them in an objective way, as objectively as possible, and from the bottom of my heart, not trying to offend or criticize anyone or criticize your work. You all have done an excellent job. You have focused on the needs of your communities to make proposals, and that is already extremely valuable. So I'm just going to give you a few tips that can help you improve your proposals and always to help you improve and to have better objectives. All right, I'll start with Irene's proposal. And I would say that I would like to see that the expected outcomes could have more quantitative aspects because they will allow measurement later on. Moreover, it would also be important if the results could land the issues that you address in a more tangible way so that we can see more clearly what you expect to achieve once the plan is implemented. Another recommendation for Irene is that her activities could be more descriptive in terms of what. For example, how would the training be carried out? How many sessions have you thought about? You don't have this in the plan. And it's really important for anyone reading your plan how that is in your head. The amount of sessions that you want to have, how many participants, that is also important. How many you will have per session, and what is the group? Are you going to divide them up by gender, by age? How do you plan to do that? Also, who would support you in training? That would be interesting to know. You mentioned alternative ways of obtaining funds, but there are many. So it would be great if you could be a little bit more specific. And if you could say, I propose, for example, to do artwork or to have yucca or corn crops, or to have a smaller groups of goats or something like that. You need to be more specific because otherwise reading your presentation is not easy to see. I'd like you to evaluate again the timeline. You have a very short timeline as presented month by month, but I believe that month 2 looks very packed. You have several activities that would, you could redistribute your activities a little bit better. Perhaps when the project is too ambitious, the organization can say, yeah, we can do it, but you don't want to saturate the timeline because that way you might not be able to achieve your goals as well in the timeline that you want to work with. Also, when I see alliances, for example, if I'm not mistaken, I've seen 3. You have 3 partners. I wonder how you're going to link with those allied organizations and how they're going to link with the project. How is each one going to support you? You tell us what they do, but we don't know their role implementing your project. We would like to know that. I also would like to see the plan enriching a little bit more, developing a little bit more the sustainability issues. I'm going to repeat this word a lot. Sustainability. What do I mean by this? How do I see the future impact of my project? So it's not going to end at the 3 months of your implementation. How will the impact continue? So we'd like to see that impact over time beyond your project. You mentioned the total population of Naraconti. but I don't see very defined. What's the objective population? Number of people. It's more than 1.5 million of people that the population you're talking about. So I'd like to see a little bit more if you could say specifically what part of this population, maybe geographically you can define it, where you have a group of maybe 100 people from at the place where you are, but not take it all in such general terms. It would be great, but it's really too ambitious. So it would be great to adjust to a specific population. Now I'm going to go to Regina's project. Regina, when I read your objectives B and C are the same. So be careful when you present things like that. They're exactly the same. You're changing only a couple of words at the end. So that caught my eye. So please be careful with that. With the objectives, it's very important to remember something in terms of something that we call evaluating projects, something we call the SMART methodology. You may have read about this. So objectives needs to be specific, measurable, reachable, realistic, and of a limited duration. So when you read the objectives, you need to see clearly all of these things. And if you can say, I want to train 30 people, that would be even better. I want to recognize 3 territories. So please be very specific. So when there's follow-up, we can see if you're going in the right direction. In terms of the expected outcomes, I recommend that they're more specific. It would be great if they can be quantitative again. Please keep in mind that the expected outcomes, that is the best thing we have to evaluate and monitor your project. As it's been said, monitoring is important to evaluate if the objectives are being met or not. And when I monitor your project and I see that the objectives are not being met, 2-3 projects within the project, I need to reevaluate, go back and see what's failing. But if the expected outcomes don't give me enough concrete information in numbers, in places, in objective population, that monitoring is very difficult. And without monitoring, we cannot complete a successful implementation. I thought that it was beautiful that you connected the objectives with the activities in a very clear table. I like that a lot. I think that if you add to that table a 3rd column with expected outcomes, then it would be fantastic. The objective with the expected outcome, with the activities that you propose would be so clear to reach everything. So they will all be linked. That would be great. Okay, what else? I think that there are some objectives that could be much more specific. An example that I can give you, how many indigenous territories there are today, on how many indigenous territories constituted indigenous territories do you expect to have after the project? 3? There are 3 and you expect 6, so you expect to create 3 more. It would be great to land that reality because we don't have the entire context. So give us numbers, give us information that is very concrete, because that would help us have a much clearer idea of what you expect to achieve. In terms of activities, you could also indicate quantities. As I was telling your colleague, number of workshops, how many trainings you want to carry out. You're saying that you want to have socializing meetings. Well, who? Who are you going to socialize? Your community? Other communities? Are you going to reach older people, other groups? What other age groups? That would be interesting to know. The last activity of the first objective, so that you can review it, the last activity with the first objective is not an activity per se, it's a goal. So be careful. Sometimes we confuse those two. When we present activities, we write the objective. The activity is exactly what you're going to do to reach that objective. Are you do a training? Are you have a meeting? Are you going to do a workshop? So tell us what you're going to do. So that's what should go there. I noticed that you mentioned some abbreviations, not many, 3 or 4, perhaps 3, but when you mentioned them and I read them, I didn't know what they were. So it is very important when we use abbreviations to have a little list of what they mean, or next to it say what they are, so that the person who reads this can really understand fully what you're saying. One of the activities ends with 3 dots. I didn't know whether you meant to write something else, or if by mistake you added 2 points, 2 periods. So it would be important to review that. Again, the issue about sustainability. Your plan also has to discuss sustainability. That is how sustainable it is down the road. And it would be great to have a little paragraph that it says how you're going to carry out your monitoring. How often you're going to do that? Will you have someone in charge of doing that? How are you thinking about that? I saw something else. It'd be good to have at least a small timeline, month by month, what you're going to do. This is very helpful to really concretize, to land what you're going to do. Okay. The third plan, January, had what I thought was a very complete plan. The objectives, I would recommend that they be more specific, more concrete, that they would be measurable as well, things that can be evaluated throughout the months. And if you could possibly indicate quantitative data, then that would be perfect. Also, as I told your colleague, you have several organizations, allied organizations, a big table, but you don't say how they're going to be linked to the project. And that is important to know. We need to know what you expect from them, but you've already talked to them, what kind of agreements you have with them, if you have them. Here it's very important to talk about the specific outcomes associated to the objectives and activities. The expected outcomes is such a great asset when you present a project. It would also be great if you could write how you expect to achieve sustainability for your project and the impact over time so that it doesn't die. In terms of activities, it'd be good if you could talk about the number of workshops, the number of participants. You say that you're going to send some things, you're going to provide some information. You have to say how you're going to do it, Instagram, Facebook, how. I think that's a great idea. Okay.
Okay, so Brittany, I think your presentation was really nice. A lot of colors, very beautiful. It draws your attention. It's very visual. So I think that's great, and because that's a way of transmitting your message directly and to get people's attention. So that's good. You talk about the target population in numbers. I think that's very good. And I think it's good exactly how the project is directed, who are the participants and beneficiaries. I think it would be really interesting to talk about some numbers in your specific objectives because of what I said earlier. It's easier to monitor and make it measurable. In terms of expected results, also quantities. You have some expected results, but they aren't very specific about how many people you're trying to reach. And as I was saying, this is the vital contribution for monitoring. The specific results also, but the more quantitative and specific you can be is better. Otherwise, it will be very general and we won't be able to measure to see that if you have done what you said you were going to do. In terms of the mapping of actors, that's good, but I think it should be included for all cases. When there is an interaction, how will they participate in the project? And we need to know sort of what phases they're going to participate in. So if they're going to participate only in the first objective activities, then you put that. How are they going to participate? Are they going to participate in the workshops? Or are they going to work together to expand the reach of the program? It depends on what your plans are. So what are those partnerships like? Also, in terms of the plan that you have, I think it's very challenging. I think it's you are overly ambitious. If you reviewed month by month, you could just leave what is doable for each month instead of sort of piling on so many results that you hope for, and because it will be less stressful for those who are executing it as well. So I would say distribute what results you're planning to achieve, or organize them in some way where one activity covers 3 or 4 objectives. So it doesn't seem like there's quite so many things you're trying to achieve. The last thing I'm going to talk about is sustainability. As I was saying earlier, the idea of this project shouldn't die when your 3 or 4 months of implementation end. It should have an impact on the community, right? So we need to see how we're going to make sure that the projects survive over time. And for the time, over the time period, there will be a greater impact on the communities if it lasts longer. And so I think it's really important to talk about why this project exists, who's going to continue it. Is it going to be the communities, the Indigenous women, the girls, depending on what your plan is. But think about how this project is going to be sustainable and include a paragraph on how it will indeed be sustainable. So that's it. Thank you very much to all of you for listening. Thank you, Hust, for your recommendations, for your comments. We know that all of these are made in order to enrich our work, the work of all of the participants here. So that's part of our learning also. The leaders will also be looking to see how they can strengthen their work in the organizations. That's very important. So thank you so much. And I know that each one of us will keep this in mind and be more concrete and specific so that we can actually monitor and follow up on the project. Thank you so much, Hast. I also want to take advantage of this moment to give you virtually a little recognition here on the name of the International Forum of Indigenous Women and the Global Leadership School of Indigenous Women. Recognition to Hasblade Largo Ramirez for her participation and contribution in the formation of Indigenous leaders from Africa, Asia, Latin America, North America, and the Pacific during the 10th edition of the International Human Rights and Advocacy Strategy Program. So with much gratitude given to you virtually, and it carries the signature of Teresa Zapeta, the FEMI director. We also want to thank each of you, all of the participants in all of this process, for having shared their work with us. I hope we can put in practice all of these recommendations within a few days as we conclude the projects. Thanks so much to the whole FEMI team for facilitating this work as well. We're now at the end of our session today. And if there is no further information, we will conclude the class for today. And if you still have to do your presentation, please keep these recommendations in mind. Keep in mind also the amount of time we have to be able to talk about our projects. Thank you so much, and we'll see you on Wednesday with the rest of the group. And I hope we can continue enjoying this course. We'll see you on Wednesday.
Thank you so much, Hust. Thank you.
Thank you, Hawks.